Before we begin, a gentle note. This episode discusses historical violence, disappearances, and grief in an educational, non graphic way. The focus is on memory, ethics, and the role of forensic anthropology, but the topic itself can be heavy. Please take care of yourself while listening. Hi, I'm Kai Roberts, forensic anthropology student and educator in progress. And welcome to Field Notes from the Dead, a space where forensic anthropology, archaeology, and human stories meet. And this project is where I explore how the past speaks through bodies, memory, material traces, not just a way to tell us what happened, but to remind us who matters, which is everybody. Each episode blends science, history, and storytelling to look at death with ethics, care and curiosity, whether we're talking about ancient remains, forensic cases, cultural memory, or the ways that trauma and resilience shape human lives. Today's episode is called When the Dead Speak: Memory, Forensic Anthropology, and Why Bearing Witness Still Matters. I want to talk about one of the reasons forensic anthropology exists. Not the abstract kind of way, not a discipline on paper, but why it actually came into being. Because forensic anthropology didn't just emerge from the curiosity of the past, it emerged from families, scientists, philanthropists, activists, and community leaders that started asking questions no one else wanted answers to. Those questions would be, where is my child? Where is my husband? Where is my sister? And I want to say this clearly at the beginning. This episode is not just about parallel politics. It's about people. It's about memory. It's about what happens when systems fail and ordinary people refuse to accept silence. This topic matters to me deeply, not just academically, because this is the kind of work I want to do. This is the kind of anthropology that feels real, it is necessary, and it is grounded in real human lives. There are moments in history when the dead are not ancient. They are not distant. They are someone's current missing person. And when that happens, the work of anthropology becomes something else entirely. It becomes witnessing. What does it mean to disappear? In the mid to late 20th century, across several countries in South America, thousands of people disappeared. Not died, not arrested necessarily. They just disappeared, kidnapped, removed. In Argentina, during the General George Rafael Videla dictatorship, which was roughly between 1976 and 1983, an estimated 30,000 people just vanished. In Chile, under Pinochet, thousands were detained and never returned. In Guatemala, more than 200,000 people were killed during the Civil War, many of them indigenous Maya. In El Salvador, similar patterns of disappearances were occurring over decades of conflict. Families were not told what happened. There were no death certificates, no graves, simply no answers. So imagine, what does that do to a person? What does that do to the community? There was no closure, there was no ritual, there was no certainty. Just waiting, and for some worse, they were witnessing and knowing, and they were dealing with the silence of not being heard. I want to talk about a group of activists in Argentina during this time period. They are the Madres de Plaza de Mayo. They were something extraordinary. They were a group of mothers and grandmothers, just ordinary women that began gathering in a public space in Buenos Aires the Plaza de Mayo. They wore white scarves embroidered with the names of their missing children, spouses, families. They walked in circles week after week, month after month, year after year. They become known as the Madres de Plaza de Mayo, the mothers of the disappeared. They were asking for truth. They wanted answers to where their loved ones were going. Where are they? What happened to them? Why won't anyone tell us? They were there to preserve memory when institutions were refusing to give them existence. They documented the names of the disappeared. They told stories to anyone who would listen. They created an archive of humanity in the face of government denial, in the face of world denial. They were forcing the world to acknowledge that these people existed. They pushed for the stories of the few who escaped and returned, who were tortured and assaulted and starved, and there are accounts of some women falling pregnant while disappeared. The Madres de Plaza de Mayo fought for their communities, they fought for their families, and some of them paid the ultimate price for becoming the disappeared themselves. So this is kind of where forensic anthropology becomes more than science. In the 1980s, the Argentinian Forensic Anthropology Team, or EAAF, was formed. Their purpose was simple and enormous. They were to find the disappeared, they were to identify them, and return them to their families. These teams didn't just excavate graves. They would interview mothers, they would sit with the siblings, they listened to decades of unresolved grief, all while also being targeted. Some volunteers, interns, and doctors were shot, kidnapped, and some of them never returned home. So imagine asking someone to tell you about their missing children for the 100th time. Imagine that you were being trusted with that story and then had to turn around and go dig through a pit of bones and hopefully find identifying factors. Forensic anthropologists in this context were not just technicians, they became witnesses. They are translators between the bones that were dug up and the living that are telling their stories. Identification isn't just scientific success. It is the difference between they disappeared and this is my daughter and she existed. There's one anthropologist I follow, Alexa Haggerty, who spoke about how much of their work wasn't just excavation. It was listening. Listening to the families describe clothing, habits, scars, stories. Listening to people reconstruct lives that had been erased from official history. That's something we don't talk about enough in science. Testimony is data, memory is evidence, and grief holds information that we so desperately need to continue to connect with humanity and stay grounded in our work. Anthropology at its best takes those things seriously, not as emotional extras, but as a central source of knowledge. And when remains are finally identified, when a name is restored to a body, something profound happens. The person stops being unknown. They return to being someone. Why does this matter? It would be easy to think this was just history, something that was tragic, but still in the past, still 40 and 50 years ago, something that belonged to another country and at another time. But the truth is, this work continues because inequality continues in death investigation. And it's still here today, even in North America, and it was long before our current headlines. We have seen how Indigenous communities fight for attention, for their missing women and children. We have seen migrant deaths that are going unidentified. People of color experienced and are continuing to experience a lack of the justice in the justice system. Families are navigating broken and underfunded systems currently, like today. Cases where certain lives receive less urgency than others. It's sad. It's not a political statement. It's a documented reality all over, and especially within the forensic scholarship. And it's exactly why forensic anthropology exists. Not for the prestige of it, not for the fascination, but for the families of the broken systems. We are for dignity and we are for truth against all else. Today, we are experiencing our own sort of disappeared. Our illegal migrants, indigenous, people of color, our LGBTQ, and anyone who is considered a disparager of the current regime is simply poof. They are taken from our streets. They are taken from their homes and workplaces with no system for tracking, no system to find their movements. They have no answers as to where our people are going. But what's really scary is that they do not care where our people are going. This is the kind of anthropology that feels honest to me. Forensic anthropology. It can seem detached. It seems abstract in a way that most people cannot understand, but it's grounded in incredible responsibility for those who undertake becoming bioarchaeologists and forensic anthropologists. We don't just want to study bones because they're interesting, and they are, but I want to study them because they tell stories that no one else can tell us. Because sometimes the dead are the only witnesses that are left to tragedies, to families, to communities. And sometimes the living are waiting decades for someone to listen. Forensic anthropology, at its core, may seem just about death, but it's not. It's about remembrance. It's about dignity. It's about refusing to let people vanish quietly. The Madres of Plaza de Mayo didn't have forensic tools, but they had persistence, love, memory, and above all else, they had dedication. The anthropologists that formed teams didn't just help them bring justice, they brought names back to loved ones. And sometimes that was everything. That was what was needed. Because every person deserves to be remembered, and every family deserves to know the truth. Do you want a more thorough class on the disappeared of South America? How they were found and the stories that help remember, but not only the pain and all of the sadness, but the love that these communities felt. Do you want a real history lesson that is currently starting to happen right now? I will be releasing a online class soon. So save this video and check back. I will put it in the comments once I have it uploaded and ready to go. So I'm going to be transparent. None of what I've shared today comes from just my brain. This work stands on decades of scholarships, on the labor of forensic teams, and on the courage of families who refused to let their loved ones disappear. If you'd like to learn more about the history and the work I am discussing in this episode, here are some of the sources I used, but I'm also going to include these in the episode description. So if you don't catch them, don't worry, just read down and you'll be able to find them. Much of what we know about the disappeared today in Argentina comes from the 1984 report Nunca Más, produced by the National Commission on the Disappearance of Persons. The history and the ongoing work of the Madres and Abuelas of Plaza de Mayo is documented on their official website and in Rita Arditi's book Searching for Life. And I'm sorry if I messed that up. The work of the Argentine Forensic Anthropology Team, or EAAF, has been foundational to forensic anthropology and human rights investigations worldwide. You can learn more about it and their missions at eaaf.org. For a real and deeper understanding of how memory, testimony, and trauma shape these societies, I recommend the work of anthropologists such as Vina Das, Antonius Robin, and Francisco Fernandez. You can find all of their things on Amazon, and if you search in Google, you'll come up with tons of peer-reviewed papers just to be able to read into what is happening. For documentation of violence and recovery efforts in Guatemala, the United Nations report, Guatemala, Memory of Silence, and the REMHI projects, Nunca Más, are essential to reading this. And for ongoing conversations about inequality in death investigations and whose cases receive attention, I've drawn from scholarship and advocacy around missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls in North America. All of these sources are listed in the description if you'd like to explore further. The work belongs to so many people, families, scholars, activists, and communities who refuse to let their disappeared remain invisible. And I'm grateful to be learning from them.